Welcome, Storm Nation. Hey, a lot of things going on here in 2020. Some big rule changes are going to hit in August 1st, 2020 about some changes to bowling balls and things you can and can't do to them. And we wanted to kind of talk to our nation of fans about what's going to happen and what's going on and what you can look forward to with the change and things to kind of help you with what you're currently dealing with now in your equipment. But before that all starts, we'd like to kind of do a little bit of an intro video showing you kind of what these terms we're going to be talking about throughout this 10-part series. So today in this video, we're going to kind of introduce you to a couple different topics in this video series, so that when you, as a consumer and a pro shop operators that are going to watch this video, have an understanding of what's going on. Because many times we'll talk about core shapes, we'll talk about radiuses of gyration, we'll talk about total differential and intermediate differential. And sometimes they're going to say, hey, what are you talking about? So Alex, lead us in here, kind of what we have to look forward to.
Yeah, these are all really big topics, and we are going to be discussing these in pretty much every single part of our 10-part video series. So we want to make sure that you guys have a really good understanding of what each of these means. So we'll start with core shape here. Okay, there's all kinds of different shapes that you can get out of cores inside bowling balls, but they all kind of fall into two broad categories, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Now, along with each of these, you're going to see that there are three different numbers, okay? And these three numbers are very important, and that's what we're going to talk about. So that's going to be the RG, the total differential, and the intermediate differential. Now, you'll notice between symmetrical and asymmetrical, you see that intermediate differential on symmetrical balls usually won't even be advertised because it's 000, it's not even there.
Right.
It's the same from the Y to the Z axis. But what we're going to look at here, let's start with the symmetricals. You can see that we have 2.48 on the RG. This is a velocity core found inside the phase 2, phase 3. 248 is a pretty low RG number.
Yeah.
That number can vary anywhere from, we would say, 246 I think is the limit,
Yep.
and then up to 280.
Yep.
So 248 is definitely pushing the lower end of the spectrum there. Total differential, that can be anywhere from 0 to 0.060. So 51, we have quite a bit of total differential. The higher that gets, the more imbalance that there is in the core, right?
Sure, more flare potential of the bowling ball. So those, when you do draw it a little bit stronger, and bowlers, when you're looking at your ball and you see the multiple little track lines on the ball, the bigger the differential, the more that you're going to see, the more possible track lines you can see on that bowling ball.
Definitely. And then if we go to intermediate, again, we're still on the symmetrical here. We see 0.000. Not going to be any difference on symmetricals because there's no asymmetry in the weight
Correct.
block. So some general characteristics of symmetricals, you're going to see slower transitioning balls, a little bit more even rolling front to back off the end of the pattern, not quite as sharp. And they're a little bit less versatile with drilling, especially now that one of the rules that we're going to talk about is the balance holes going away. A lot of these symmetrical balls, it's going to be hard to get that migration path or that PSA to move from anywhere close to inside the thumb.
Sure.
So you're definitely going to see more of a trend with asymmetrical equipment because we're able to do more things with
Sure,
it.
the versatility in the asymmetrical ball is much greater in drilling versus symmetrical. Yeah.
Yes.
We used to have the opportunity to use balance holes to change and manipulate those symmetrical shapes, and as of August 1st, 2020, we won't be able to use them. We'll talk about it.
Go over to the asymmetricals here. Same exact categories, but you're going to notice that intermediate differential, we're all the way up to 0.017. Now, there's not really a set limit on what the intermediate is able to be. We really haven't gone much higher than, what would you say, 28 or so.
28 would probably be about the max, and
Yeah.
it was, I think, in a G2.
Yeah. Usually you want it to be at most about half of what the total differential is. Otherwise, you kind of start getting a little bit, it gets a little unpredictable to drill.
It gets a little bit
It's
touchy in
harder.
drilling,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So things you're going to see out of that, faster transitions, more angular, and definitely more versatile because you now have this third axis in there that's actually influencing how that ball is rolling down. Let's move on to RG. You can talk a little bit about that really
Sure,
quick.
I mean, RG, it's easy to think about it. So we measure the lowest RG axis is around the X-axis. And so if you look at this, both of this in these two cores, we're taking from those arrows, go straight from the pin down through the bottom of the weight block. And so we think of it kind of like the North and South Pole. So that pin is the low RG of the x-axis. And that usually, we define that usually by a manufacturer's pin. There's a manufacturer out there that's using a circle to note that on the ball because they're inverting and putting the pin on the bottom side of the ball. But remember, the x-axis goes all the way through the ball and it's the lowest RG. So the idea is the lowest RG, it spins the fastest. So when we rotate them on an RG swing, what we do is we'll start it in this axis and here's the pin, so we'll rotate it. So the narrower it is around that axis, the faster it spins. Think of a figure skater when they're out there on the ice and they spread their arms, they slow down. When their arms come together, they get really fast because their center of gravity gets closer and closer and closer to their core of their body. So the tighter and the more narrow the mass is along that axis, the lower the RG. So both on the velocity core and the physics, the neutron cores, we see the same, that they're very narrow around that axis. So we looked at that RG on both of those, it was at 248. So very similar characteristics there between the symmetrical and asymmetrical for that RG value.
Perfect.
So let's talk a little bit about X and the X versus the Y.
Okay, so total differential, this is going to be the difference in RG values. Now that's the key, RG values. A lot of people say the height and the width, but it's the RG values that are associated with the height and the width. So the bigger that the difference between those two are, the more total differential that you're going to have. As I mentioned, 0.060 is the maximum allowable amount of total differential that USBC allows us to use. So we're basically just looking, like I say, the difference in that RG value from the height of the core to the width of the core. So the more difference that there is in that shape, the more potential imbalance, depending on how you drill the bowling ball, you're going to get, and the more or less flare you'll see out of the ball.
Yeah, so if we spin it on this axis here, which is the Y-axis, think about, like I talked about before, was that skater, that's more extension along that axis, so it's wider, so it's slower spinning. So between the fastest spinning and the slowest spinning axis, that's where we get that total differential between those X and Y.
All right, lastly, we have intermediate differential here. So now that's going to be the difference from the Y to the Z. Now, one reason why I mentioned with symmetricals, why you're not going to see any difference is no matter what direction that you look at this around the outside, you'll see it's the same width all the way around, where if with the atomic core here, you can see that it's much wider and then it's actually much skinnier this other direction. So there is going to be a difference in RG values between those two axes. How big that difference is going to be how much total intermediate that we see.
Yeah, you look, if we spin it on this Y-axis, the atomic core, and I refer to it as the neutron core. We spin it on that Y-axis, see it's still wide both if we look at that, both axes. But if we spin it up on that 90 degrees to it, that's what we call the Z-axis. Notice that it's a little narrower, so it's going to spin a little bit quicker, but not as fast as on the X-axis. So things to think about when we talk about these different axes and the stronger cores versus the weaker core, the symmetricals versus the asymmetricals, and taking those all into account in all the information we're going to deliver over the next several months.
Quick summary of everything that we talked about today. Bowling ball cores can be either symmetrical or asymmetrical in design. Each one has pros and cons. You should have a mixture of both in your bag for sure. Asymmetrical cores are going to be a little bit more versatile, as we talked about. They can be manipulated a little bit more through the drilling because of those higher intermediate differentials. You can swing the PSA one direction or the other, and it is going to have a little bit of an influence in how the bowling ball is going down the lane.
And remember, every time that we advertise the RG value of the bar, we're advertising that RG value around that X-axis or the lowest RG axis. And that the total differential, remember the differences between that X-axis and that Y-axis, and the total difference between those RG values determines that total differential.
And then lastly here, intermediate differential is the difference in RG values between the Y to the Z. So it's literally the same thing as total differential. It's just using two different points of reference. We're going to see more higher values on asymmetrical bowling balls. You really don't see any significant amount on any symmetrical bowling balls.
No, and remember, these numbers are all pre-drilled numbers. And so we're going to put some holes in there. And so punching holes into a bowling ball, we are also possibly going to punch into some portions and pieces of that mass that can start to change those numbers. So all these numbers that are given to you on the box are pre-drilled numbers, and note that they will change. We'll talk about in those videos how they do change by putting holes in a bowling ball. and with a balance wheel, without a balance wheel. So down the road, we'll talk more about that. Okay, Storm Nation fans, thanks for tuning in to this first introductory video. We're going to deliver a 10-part series following these in the next several weeks with a lot of great information about the changes to the rules, about things to look forward to. And also, remember, you can always write in, phone in to tech@stormbowling.com, or you can reach out to Hank B at stormbowling.com or alex.hoskins at stormbowling.com and ask us for other things you'd like us to talk about, because we're going to try to continue to give you some tech tips and some tech information throughout the next several months and whatever, maybe several years if we're all still together that long. So thanks again, Storm Nation, for tuning in.